I've been reading this book, Letters from a Stoic, which is written by Seneca, and I thought I'd read a chapter from it as I am trying to track what I'm doing in my life. And this is one of the books I've been reading. I've been interested in Stoicism for a few years now. And I thought it'd be cool to read at least a chapter, depending on how long it is, because I don't know how long it is. Sometimes it's 3 pages, sometimes it's literally 25. So we'll see, I guess. But yeah, perhaps we'll learn something new. Let's see. This is a letter. I don't know Roman lettering. Letter CXIV. I think it's 200 something, 214, or yeah, I think so, or 114. You ask why it is that at certain periods a corrupt literary style has come into being, and how it has that a gifted mind develops a leaning towards some fault or other, resulting in the prevalence at one period of a bombastic form of exposition, at another of an effeminate form, fashioned after the manner of songs, and why it is that at one time approval was won by extravagant conceits, and at another by sentences of an abrupt, elusive character that conveys more to the intelligence than to the ear, and why there have been eras in which metaphors have been shamelessly exploited. The answer lies in something that you hear commonly enough, something which among the Greeks has passed into a proverb. People's speech matches their lives, and just as the way in which each individual expresses himself resembles the way he acts, so in the case of a nation of declining morals and given over to luxury forms of expression at any given time mirror the general behavior of that society. A luxuriant literary style, assuming that it is the favored and accepted style, and not just appearing in the odd writer here and there, is a sign of an extravagant society. The spirit and the intellect cannot be of different hues. If the spirit is sound, if it is properly adjusted, and has dignity and self-control, the intellect will be sober and sensible too. And if the former is tainted, the latter will be infected as well. You've observed, surely, how a person's limbs drag and his feet dawdle along if his spirit is a feeble one, and how the lack of moral fibre shows in his very gait if his spirit is addicted to soft living, and how if his spirit is a lively and dashing one, his step is brisk, and how if it is a prey to madness or the similar state of anger, his body moves along in an uncontrolled sort of way, in a rush rather than a walk. Isn't this all the more likely to be the case where a person's intellect is concerned, his intellect being wholly bound up with his spirit, moulded by and responsive to it, and looking to it for guidance? The manner in which Maecenas lived is too well known for there to be any need to describe the way he walked, his self-indulgent nature, his passion for self-display, his reluctance that his faults should escape people's notice. Well then, wasn't his style just as undisciplined as his dress was sloppy? Wasn't his vocabulary just as extraordinary as his turnout, his retinue, his house, his wife? He would have been a genius if he had pursued a more direct path instead of going out of his way to avoid being intelligible. Had he not been as loose in matters of style as he was in everything else. Which is why you'll notice that his eloquence resembles a drunken man's, tortuous and rambling and thoroughly eccentric. Could there be a worse expression than the bank with main of stream and woods, and look at men tilling? Whoa, my eyes are not focusing. I guess because I'm tired, but... At men tilling with where is the channel, driving the gardens back with the shallows churning over. What about a person's curveting at a woman's beck, with lips on billing bent, a sigh the opening of his addresses, neck lolling like a forest giant in his ecstasy? The unregenerate company rummage homes for victuals, raiding them with provision jars and trading death for hope. My eyes are not focusing, so I'm going to grab a light to shine on this paper, and in the hope that it works better. Alright, let's see if this works, because if it doesn't, then I might have to cut this short. Because how am I going to read if my eyes don't focus, you know? But hardly should I call a witness on his holy day my guardian spirit, else the wick of a slender waxlight and sputtering meal, mothers or wives accouter the hearth. When you read this sort of thing, doesn't it immediately cross your mind that this is the same man who invariably went around with casual clothes on in the capital, even when Maecenas was discharging the emperor's duties during the absence of Augustus? The officer coming to him for the daily code word would find him in informal attire, who appeared on the bench, on the platform, and at any public gathering wearing a mantle draped over his head, leaving both ears exposed, looking just like the rich man's runaway slave as depicted on the comic stage. The same man whose public escort at a time when the nation was embroiled in a civil war and the capital was under arms and in a state of alarm consisted of a pair of eunuchs, no clue what that is, and who went through 1,000 ceremonies of marriage with his one wife. These expressions of his, strung together in such an outrageous fashion, tossed out in such a careless manner, constructed with such a total disregard of universal usage, reveal a character equally revolutionary, equally perverted and peculiar. Maecenas' greatest claim to glory is regarded as having been his clemency. He spared the sword, refrained from bloodshed, and showed his power only in his defiance of convention. But he has spoilt this very claim of his by these monstrous stylistic frolics, for it becomes apparent that he was not a mild man but a soft one. That perplexing word order, those transpositions of words, and those startling ideas which have indeed the quality of greatness in them, but which lose all their effect in the expression, will make it obvious to anyone that his head was turned by overmuch prosperity. It is a fault which is sometimes that of a man and sometimes that of the age. When prosperity has spread luxury over a wide area of society, people start by paying closer attention to their personal turnout. The next thing that engages people's energies is furniture. These pains are devoted to the houses themselves, so as to have them running out over broad expanses of territory, to have the walls glowing with marble shipped from overseas and the ceilings picked out in gold, to have the floor shining with a luster matching the panels overhead. Splendor then moves onto the table, where praise is courted through the medium of novelty and variations in the accustomed order of dishes, making what normally rounds off a meal the first course and giving people as they go what they used before to be given on arrival. Once a person's spirit has acquired the habit of disdaining what is customary and regards the usual as banal, it starts looking for novelty in its methods of expression as well. At one moment, it will disinter and revive archaic or obsolete expressions. At another, it will coin new, unheard of expressions and give a word a new form. At another, this is something that has become very common recently, the bold and frequent use of metaphor passes for good style. There are some who cut their thoughts short and hope to win acclaim by making their meaning elusive, giving their audience a mere hint of it. There are others who stretch them out, reluctant to let them go. There are others who still do not merrily fall into a defective style, which is something that is inevitable if one is striving for any lofty effect, but have a passion for the defect for its own sake. So wherever you notice that a corrupt style is in general favor, you may be certain that in that society people's characters as well have deviated from the true path, in the same way as extravagance in dress and entertaining are indications of a diseased community. So an aberrant literary style, provided it is widespread, shows that the spirit from which people's words derive has also come to grief. And in fact, you need feel no surprise at the way corrupt work finds popularity, not merely with the common bystander, but with your relatively cultivated audience. The distinction between these two classes of critic is more one of dress. What you might find more surprising is the fact that they do not confine themselves to admiring passages that contain defects, but admire the actual defects themselves as well. The former thing has been the case all through history. No genius that ever won acclaim did so without a measure of indulgence. Name me any man you like who had a celebrated reputation, and I'll tell you what the age he lived in forgave him, what it turned a blind eye to in his work. I'll show you plenty of stylists whose faults never did them any harm, and some who were actually helped by them. I'll even say this. I could show you some men of the highest renown, men held up as objects of wonder and admiration, in whose case to amend their faults would be to destroy them, their faults being so inextricably bound up with their virtues. Besides, there are no fixed rules of style. They are governed by the usage of society, and usage never stands still for any length of time. Many speakers hark back to earlier centuries for their vocabulary, talking in the language of the 12 tables. And there's an asterisk which says, a set of tablets dating from 451 to 450 before Christ, which record a basic code of laws and were the earliest piece of Latin writing known to the Romans. It may be noted here that in this letter Seneca sees or draws no distinction between rules applying to literature and rules applying to oratory. Gracchus, Crassus, and Curio are too polished and modern for them. They go right back to Appius and Coransanius. Others, by contrast, in seeking to confine themselves to familiar, everyday expressions, slip into an undistinguished manner. Both these practices, in their different ways, are debased style, quite as much so as the rejection of any expression that is not high-sounding, florid and poetical, avoiding the indispensable expressions in normal use. The one is as much a fault as the other. In my view, the first paying undue attention to itself, and the second unduly neglecting itself. The former removes the hair from its legs as well, the latter not even from its armpits. Let us turn our attention to composition. How many species of fault can I show you where this is concerned. Some like it broken and uneven, and go out of their way to disarrange any passage with a relatively smooth and even flow. They want every transition to come with a jolt and see virility and forcefulness in a style the irregulatories of which jar the ear. With some other literary figures, it is not a case of composition, but of setting words to melodies. So sweetly, softly do they glide along. What shall I say about the kind in which words are held back, and keep us waiting for a long time before they make their reluctant appearance, right at the end of the period? What of that, like Cicero's, which moves to its conclusion in a leisurely fashion, in a gentle and delayed incline, and unvaryingly true to its customary rhythm? In the field of the epigram, too, false compromise, a tameness and childishness, or a boldness and daring that oversteps the bounds of decency, or a richness that has a cloying quality, or a barrenness in the outcome, an ineffectiveness, a ringing quality, and nothing more. These faults are introduced by some individual dominating letters at the time, are copied by the rest, and handed on from one person to another. Thus, in Sallust's heyday, abruptly terminated sentences, unexpectedly sudden endings, and the brevity carried to the point of obscurity passed for a polished style. Lucius Arruntius, the historian of the Punic War, and a man of unusual simplicity of character, was a follower of Sallust, and strove after that kind of style. By means of money he procured an army. Hired one, in other words, is an expression found in Sallust. Arruntius took a fancy to this expression, procured, and found a place for it on every page, saying in one passage, they procured our route. In another, King Hiero of Syracuse procured a war, and in another, this news procured the surrender of the people of Panormus to the Romans. These are merely by way of giving you samples of the practice. The whole book is rife with them. What was occasionally in Sallust is a frequent, almost incessant occurrence in Arruntius, which is easily enough explained, for whereas Sallust hit on such expressions, Arruntius cultivated them. You can see what the result is when some writer's fault is taken as a model. Sallust spoke of wintry rains. Arruntius, in the first book of the Punic War, says, "Suddenly the weather was wintry." In another place, when he wants to describe a particular year as having been a cold one, he says, "The whole year was wintry." In another passage he writes, "From there he dispatched 60 transport vessels, lightly laden apart, from troops and essential crew, in spite of a wintry, northerly gale." He drags the word in constantly, in every conceivable place. Sallust at one point writes, "Seeking, amidst civil war, the plaudits of rectitude and integrity." Arruntius was unable to restrain himself from inserting right at the beginning of his first book mention of Regulus' tremendous plaudits. Now these faults, and others like them, stamped on a writer's style by imitation, and not themselves evidence of extravagant ways or corrupt attitudes. For the things upon which you base any judgments or a person's psychology must be things peculiar to himself, things that spring from his own nature, a hot-tempered man having a hot-tempered style, an emotional man, an overexcited one, a self-indulgent man, a soft and flabby one, and so on. And the last is the manner one observes adopted by the sort of person who has his beard plucked out, or has it plucked out in parts, who keeps himself close-shaven and smooth around his lips, but leaves the rest of it to grow, who wears cloaks in flamboyant colours, who wears a diaphanous robe, who is reluctant to do anything that might escape people's attention, who provokes and courts such attention, and so long as he is looked at, does not mind whether it is with disapproval. Such is the manner of Maecenas and every other writer whose stylistic errors are not accidental, but deliberate and calculated. It is something that stems from a serious affliction of the spirit. When a person is drinking, his tongue only starts stumbling after his mental faculties have succumbed and given way or broken down. The same applies with this drunkenness. What else can one regard it as, of style? No one suffers from it unless his spirit is unstable. See then that the spirit is well looked after. Our thoughts and our words proceed from it. We derive our demeanor and expression and the way we walk from it. If the spirit is sound and healthy, our style will be firm and forceful and virile, I don't know. But if the spirit tumbles, all the nest of our personality comes down in ruins with it. Here's a quote. The queen unharmed, the bees all live at once. Once she is lost, the hives in anarchy. This is from Virgil Georgics 4. The spirit is our queen. So long as she is unharmed, the rest remains at its post, obedient and submissive. If she wavers for a moment, in the same moment the rest all falters. Okay, the light helped. Turns out it was good enough to keep me focused on the page. I did notice that I had difficulty not only speaking and saying the words, but also reading it fluently because I am tired, and also processing what's actually being written down. Usually I do read at different times, and if I'm less tired, it makes a lot more sense because obviously then I can process what's being said. But to be fair, this chapter was very big in fancy words and descriptions that were not very necessary. Or at least it kind of felt like he was giving a lot of examples rather than just the actual lesson in a clear way. Sometimes in the book, he has a short chapter or a longer chapter where he speaks in a lot clearer terms. So those chapters are easier to read and easier to understand. And what I've noticed is that as the letters go on in order, it seems that the first letters, at least to me, were the ones that had the best lessons in them and they were explained in the best way. I'm guessing it's probably been a choice of the people putting them together so that people keep reading. But yeah, as I get further into the book, which is about this far, so say about 5/6 into the book, it's the lessons have gotten less clear, and also just like the letters themselves have gotten more difficult to understand. Though most of the time, at the end of every letter, he kind of brings it back to the main point he's trying to make in a clear way. So even if I don't fully understand what's being said throughout the whole letter, that's or the whole chapter, same thing, I still can read the last page or last 2 pages and oftentimes still get what he's trying to explain. But I also sometimes like looking up the words that are being used, since if he's using very many difficult words, it's also difficult to figure out what a word means in the context of more difficult words. But perhaps I'll look back on this in a year or a few years and think, oh, I understand all of those words now and have learned many new words, so my vocabulary has improved lots. But I've also been reading aloud more often to myself, so that I have to, or so I can practice pronouncing words and practice my speaking abilities, my reading abilities as well. Because I noticed, especially when I started, I would have difficulty when I was reading, pausing at the right times when there was a comma or a dot. I don't know the exact termination in English. Or like a quote, something like that. So that's helped me out in kind of reading it as a better story, but at the same time, by reading in English and pronouncing so many different words also that I don't know, I am improving both my vocabulary and my pronunciation. Currently, I have somewhat of an English accent, from some say more northern English accent, but yeah, I've been trying to kind of get out the quirks because I'm half Dutch and half British, and I used to sound very Dutch, and now I've been slowly over the last couple of years trying to sound more British, because when I'm speaking English, I don't want to sound Dutch. I want to sound like I'm from England, and then when I speak Dutch, I obviously sound like I'm from the Netherlands. At this point in time, I think one of the biggest giveaways that I've noticed and other people have noticed is that I say the R in many words, like the word, which makes it sound to some people like I'm Dutch if they know the Dutch accent, or they think I'm Irish because the Irish also pronounce the R quite a bit. Whereas if I were to say word, I need to say word or world, or require instead of require, where I say the R very vividly. Vividly? I don't even know if that's the right description, but very clearly I am saying the R in many words. So by reading to myself, I'm not only focusing on what I'm reading, but also on the way I'm pronouncing things. And I'm a lot more active with that than if I were to be in conversation, because when you're in conversation, you kind of just want to speak and kind of just want to focus on what the other person's saying and respond, And if you're distracted by the way you're saying things, I feel like it takes away from the conversation. So by reading aloud, I'm also trying to improve my accent and my pronunciation. But I guess that's all for today. So far, this book has been very interesting to read. I have gotten into philosophy a lot more in the last 2 years, but in the last year I've really been diving into it more, and this is one of the first books I've been reading on it. I'm also interested in reading other philosophy besides Stoicism, obviously, but it's one of the things that got me interested into philosophy first. So I thought I'd start with that. And yeah, I think after having spent quite a few years in personal development or self improvement, depending on what you call it, I noticed that I was very focused on many things that were being said in that community, where it's like work hard and work out and eat healthy and improve your social skills, which are all good things to do, trying to make money and stuff. They're all good things to do. But after a while, it's kind of like nobody really talks about philosophy and the way you think about things. They're just like, listen to me and do this. And they don't tell you, go and. So, well, some people tell you go and journal and stuff. But that's more so, I felt like oftentimes they're saying, go and journal so you can plan out your day tomorrow so you can be more productive. Whereas there's hardly, or at least the community I was in, what I was watching, there weren't that many people saying that, you should go and journal, you should go and meditate, you should try and understand your mind, you should try and think rationally and be good at reasoning and have critical thinking abilities and understand your own mind. That's something that wasn't really said very much. But I kind of got into that more, and I'm realizing that it's probably more useful to learn about these things, because by developing the way you think, the way you look at life, the way you handle situations because of how your mind works, it makes it easier to do all the other things as well, such as be consistent with working out, doing things that are difficult and hard, enjoying life just in general, not getting annoyed at stuff, etc. It makes the quality of life better, whilst you can still do all the other things like being healthy and working out, etc. So yeah, I look forward to doing this more, reading more about philosophy. I'm actually thinking of studying applied philosophy next year, starting in September, I think, or October, in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, in Dutch. Unfortunately, I really want to study in English, but this is the only option for me since I'm doing one level below university level. If I do this for 1 year, I could go and study at university, which means I could go and study an English course, a philosophy course in English potentially, because I prefer English. I do most things in English, except when I'm in the Netherlands, I speak in Dutch to people. That's pretty much it. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to learning more about philosophy, how you can apply it, because I'm going to be studying applied philosophy, not just trying to say fancy things about life and how to look at life, but also how to apply it so you improve your life, Yeah, I think this is currently in my life the thing I'm most interested in. So curious to see where it goes. Curious to see how my mindset changes, what lessons I learn. But if you're curious to see, I'd say subscribe, because I will be documenting everything I'm learning. So you'll be with me every day to see the things I'm learning about philosophy and about other things in life, and how I'm applying that to actually improve my life rather than just what's in my head. Okay. See you later.